Hi, everyone. My name is Ashley Hudson. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I specialize in working with individuals in the perinatal season, which means I work with people who are trying to conceive, who have recently conceived and are pregnant, and people who are postpartum through my practice called Pearl in Process. I love working with families in this stage, and part of that's because of my own story. I myself suffered with perinatal anxiety and depression, and after going through that, I find myself very passionate about ensuring new parents and people who are expecting get the opportunity to thrive mentally throughout their season of pregnancy and beyond. So I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to share with you some methods for thriving throughout your pregnancy. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that I can show the presentation that I have made. So, I want to start by talking about the unique season of pregnancy because I think it's under-discussed in our mental health realm in general. So, what's unique about the season of pregnancy is that we see a lot of emotions all along the spectrum clashing all at once. So let's go over that. Let's talk through what some of these emotions are and why they might be common for individuals who are expecting a baby. First of all, oftentimes we see anxiety. We have completely lost control. This means we need a sense of control to feel safe. And when we're pregnant, we can't really control everything. We can control what we eat and try to sleep and care for ourselves, but we can't control everything. And that lack of control can result in feelings of anxiety. The season of unknowns. We don't always know. I mean, sure, we can go in for an ultrasound, we can have a heart monitor, we can check on baby. We don't really know. There's a lot of unknowns, and that can feel really unsettling to people. A lot of individuals are really fearful of childbirth for various reasons. And so that is a real concern for a lot of moms I work with, is just this fear of childbirth and the unknown. And then, of course, hormones. And we'll talk more about hormones and the impact on mood soon. Additionally, we have sadness. And why? Yes, there's still the hormone piece. But also, when we're pregnant, we begin doing some reflection. How was my childhood? What did I like? What did I not like? And oftentimes I work with moms who are doing some of this reflection and find themselves feeling really sad about their childhood and kind of ruminating on things that they hope to be different for their child, but also feeling sad for themselves, having some compassion for themselves, given some of the circumstances they went through. You're grieving the relationship changes within your family of origin. So no longer are you just going to be a daughter, you're going to be a mom. Right? No longer are you just going to be a sister, you're going to be a mom. And so you're grappling with how this impact of having a baby is going to challenge some of the pre-existing templates of how you engage your family of origin. You might be grieving some changes with your partner. You're no longer going to be the sole person in his or her world. You will be really having to open up yourself to give attention to somebody different, this little baby. And you're going to have to be okay with your partner giving that baby attention too. And that's going to cause, some feelings of sadness. Oh, we're not going to be, the sole focus of your partner anymore. And that can cause sadness, which is really normal. At the same time that we're experiencing bouts of sadness and anxiety, we have, on the other hand, this pride. We are experiencing our bodies doing something absolutely miraculous. We're growing a human being, and that is something to be proud of. And so a lot of times I'm working with women who are, for the first time, really in touch with how powerful and amazing their body is. And so they're experiencing this pride. They're very proud. And then you're watching your partner fulfill their role as parent. Even when you're pregnant, you're watching your partner care for you. Maybe your partner's holding your hair while you're going through bouts of morning sickness, or scratching your back, or rubbing your feet, or driving you to appointments. You're getting to see your partner step up in that way, and that can make you feel really proud. You get to be excited about growing someone who's going to leave a legacy. And then you can also have pride in the positive experiences from your childhood. As you reflect, and I mentioned you might have some sadness around things that you lacked throughout your own childhood. You also might look at that childhood and say, wow, my parents did a really good job. I want to do that too. And then you have joy. We have this just unspeakable joy of creating new life. You get to buy new things and decorate a nursery, and you kind of get to see a small version of yourself being formed. And there's endless opportunities to share life and love. And that is all something to celebrate and to really enjoy. So all of these emotions happening at once can create quite the collision, as you might imagine. And that is what creates such a unique experience throughout pregnancy. As you are gestating, as you're growing a human, you are also growing a mother. This is not something I always have to remind people. We don't just become mothers upon conception or upon birth. We become mothers. It's a process. And there's this invisible transformation that happens that we don't really talk through, and it needs to be discussed more often, because oftentimes we're seeing moms who expect to automatically experience certain feelings or have certain impulses or responses that actually aren't there yet, and that can feel really invalidating. And so I like to talk about the invisible transformation of becoming a mother. We have to consider the gains and losses. So I talked about some of that sadness. We're really good in our culture of celebrating the gains. Baby showers, blessing ways. We do an awesome job of celebrating what's to come throughout pregnancy. But I also need to just bring to your awareness, even though it's kind of sad and hard, there are losses too. As I mentioned, you're kind of losing that privilege of being the sole focus of your partner. You might be losing options for yourself, like your career. You might be becoming a stay-at-home mom, or maybe you're becoming a working mom, and there's losses in that too. There are losses in losing maybe spontaneity or sleep. So just as you celebrate the gains, it's important to honor the losses, because so often I think postpartum depression and anxiety could be the result of not grieving properly the losses that do occur. And that's not to discredit the celebration. You can do both at the same time. New and changing roles. You are now a mother and a wife, not just a wife. You are now an employee and a mom, not just an employee. You are having to change roles and wear new hats, and that takes time. You have to break in the shoes, and it's going to be challenging. And so starting to wrap your mind around the roles that are changing throughout your pregnancy can be really important, so that you know what you're working with. Really take time to notice, what hats am I going to be putting on and taking off, and how do I feel about that? It's really important to become aware of your expectations of yourself based on your culture or your faith tradition or your community, maybe your friends, your peers, your family of origin. Really kind of pause and notice, what am I expecting of myself as a pregnant person, as a birthing person, and as a mother or a father? What am I expecting of myself as a parent? And then become aware of your expectations of your partner. A lot of times we create expectations throughout our life experiences, and we think that they are normal and that everyone has those expectations, but that's actually not the case. We all come from our own stories and our own backgrounds. So pause and notice, what are you expecting of yourself? What are you expecting of your partner? What are you expecting of your baby? And are those things reasonable? Can you become flexible in those expectations at all? Can you be hopeful at the same time as being flexible? You're going to have to adapt spiritual rhythms, and maybe you're already doing that. Maybe you used to wake up early and meditate every day, but now throughout pregnancy, you are just completely fatigued and you can't get out of bed early in the morning. And so you're having to find new rhythms. It's important not to just let go of that tradition or that ritual of prayer or meditation or reading, but to continue it and to find new ways to adapt it. And then a changing sense of self. We have to talk through. So often I work with moms in the postpartum season, and what they'll say to me is that they feel like their sense of self is being washed away. And so when I work with moms in the pregnancy season and dads, I like to really hone in on this sense of self. So ask yourself, who are you? What makes up the fabric of who you are? If someone were to describe you during your healthiest season, how would they describe you? Are you someone who loves exercise or yoga or crafts? Do you love supporting others and serving? Are you known for your faith or your spiritual practices? Really think about that, and then notice the hobbies or notice the rituals that come along with that, and do not give those things up. Come up with rhythms and allow the ways that those rituals occur to adapt to this life stage, because it's going to be very important that your sense of self remains as your world begins to change. So we'll talk briefly about the biology and how what's going on in your body impacts your mood, because this isn't all in your head. Did you know that women create 3 times the amount of estrogen in one pregnancy than they do their entire life when not pregnant? Estrogen increases serotonin receptors in the brain. So as you can imagine, with the ebb and flow of estrogen, we are experiencing quite the impact in our brains. Our neurotransmitters are shifting and changing. Our receptors are shifting and being challenged and changed like never before. And this can be why after birth, our estrogen drops and we have what they call the baby blues, right? Women are feeling tearful and sad, maybe a little down in the dumps. This is because of that estrogen changing. And we also have progesterone and other hormones at play. It's just important to notice and to know for yourself that your hormones they impact your neurotransmitters. It's not all environmental and it's not all in your head. This is biological too. And you've heard of mommy brain. It's funny that the gray matter in women's brains actually does decrease during pregnancy. And that's because some hypothesize that we are supposed to become highly specialized in certain tasks. So we're supposed to become really excellent at changing diapers or really excellent at feeding the baby. We don't need to be good at, 5,000 things anymore. We need to become excellent in 2 to 3 things to keep our baby alive. It's a beautiful way our brains were wired and created in an effort to keep our kids alive. And so that's why your brain gray matter decreases, and that might be why you get lost on the way to the grocery store. You can't figure out who that person is. You can't remember her name, even though you see her all the time. We call this mommy brain, but really it's the result of your gray matter decreasing. We talked about estrogen. Let's talk about oxytocin, because we know it as the bonding hormone. It is the hormone that's released during sex and during breastfeeding, and it can help with bonding. It also helps us see fear through the eyes of our child. And that starts while you are growing your child. So sometimes people are more sensitive to oxytocin, and the result of that can be what we call scary thoughts or intrusive thoughts. Again, there's not a ton of science that can conclude this, but it's more hypothesized through a lot of data observations, is that oxytocin can sometimes create this jolt in our system that tells us we need to be on the lookout and protect our young. And so we might have these intrusive thoughts, which are really just thoughts that get stuck in our head that no matter how hard we try to push them away, they come back. And then they come back. And it might be a visual of maybe your partner getting in a car crash, or a thought like, oh my goodness, my partner is going to have this medical, a crisis and die or something. Or it might be something happening to your baby in utero, maybe a crisis of some sort, and you're having this flashing image come through your head. We call these scary thoughts or intrusive thoughts, and it can help sometimes. I have my clients just tell themselves in the presence of that thought, that's the oxytocin speaking, it's not me. That's a thought, not an action. That's okay. And now I don't like to go through this without at least identifying dads and talking a little bit about dad's brain and body and how it changes in preparation for fatherhood. Testosterone drops, vasopressin receptors increase, cortisol, oxytocin, and prolactin levels change. This is all to help promote emotional sensitivity and awareness for the sake of bonding with the baby and with you, the birthing person. It's so interesting to know that dad's brains, they do become, different regions in the brain change, and they are really working to become more emotionally sensitive and understanding and to draw near, as this season can be challenging for some. It's really crucial to know that dads often rely more on transaction to build relationship. And I share that because oftentimes we feel an immediate connection, a deep connection. Moms, sometimes not all the time, please hear me. Sometimes moms will feel a deep, immediate connection to the baby they grew. As soon as baby's birthed, they feel this just deep sense of connectivity. They place baby on chest. There's these warm, ooey feelings, sometimes, not all the time. Dads are more gradual. Their neural circuitry requires the transaction, the back and forth transaction, in order to uphold a relationship and create value there. And that's just how they're wired. This is why sometimes you'll hear dads say, I just want the baby to be able to do something. They need to be able to make a face and the baby make a face back, or throw a ball and have the baby throw the ball back. They need interactivity to build a relational network there. And that helps draw value to the relationship. So if your partner doesn't seem immediately bonded and invested in the baby, do not be concerned. It could be a concern, but just be thoughtful surrounding that concern, knowing that their brains are different. I want to talk about perinatal mood and anxiety disorders really quickly, because it's important for you to know that these experiences can begin in pregnancy. We've talked before about them as postpartum disorders, so such as PPD or PPA. Well, what we're learning is that these can actually begin in pregnancy, and oftentimes they do, and they go undetected. And there's a slew of different conditions. It's not just depression and anxiety. We have OCD and bipolar and PTSD and psychosis. And yes, even dads can get paternal postnatal depression. And so it's important for you to know there's a continuum, and it might not just wait and hold on and show up postpartum. Oftentimes these creep in beforehand during pregnancy. So let's safeguard your mental health throughout your pregnancy. Let's talk about what you can do. Postpartum wellness planning is a really critical intervention or service that is available to you through a lot of different providers. I do provide postpartum wellness planning, and really it's just a process of coming to understand your own places of vulnerability, you and your partner's pockets and opportunities for growth, and how to fortify your marriage or your partnership in the presence of a baby. And so postpartum wellness planning can be really critical for safeguarding your mental health during the postpartum season, and ensure that you have that sense of self that doesn't get lost. Reflect on your personal expectations of yourself and your partner and talk about them. So I mentioned them earlier. I asked you to just notice what your expectations are. And now I want you to talk about them. It's important to share those with your partner. Grieve the losses and celebrate the gains. Provide space to cry over the fact that you can't spontaneously maybe go to the mountains or go to the beach or go do what live your adventure that day in the same way you used to. Celebrate the gains. Go to your baby shower. Have a blessing way. Enjoy the celebrating of this season that's so special. We talked about guarding that sense of self. Don't give up those hobbies. It's so important for you to stay tuned in to who you are and the fabric of who you are as a woman. And though that will change, and though things will get added to that, labels will get added to that, you will be a mother and so much more, it is important that you hold on to that sense of self and practice healthy boundaries. There is perhaps few other things that I talk about during the postpartum season than boundaries, because boundaries really impact your mental health. And throughout your pregnancy is a great time to start looking at your boundaries and how you feel about your sense of setting boundaries, your agency there. Are you able to say no when you need to? And how can we develop that skill appropriately so that you can lovingly say no when you need to during your postpartum season? This is how you know when to get help. If you're unable to sleep, unrelated to having to get up and pee or your baby doing jumping jacks in the middle of the night, if you're unable to sleep, it's time to seek some help. Excessive tearfulness, if you're crying a lot more than usual, all of these are going to be kind of based on your pre-pregnancy condition. If you're having more bad days than good days for like 2 weeks in a row, if you're just miserable, it's time to get help. If you're obsessively ruminating on some of those scary thoughts, if your racing thoughts and heart are causing you panic and causing you discomfort, if you are constantly fighting with your partner or your roommate or your family of origin, if you're experiencing a great deal of fear related to childbirth, if you're experiencing flashbacks of traumatic events, we often see trauma come to the surface through pregnancy and postpartum because it is such a vulnerable season. So if you are a victim of an assault or some sort of traumatic event, please keep that in mind. Gatekeeping is kind of this obsessing over processes and how things are done. So in the postpartum season, we look at bedtime routine, bath time routine, things like that, that the mom might really want control over. And so she over functions and tells the dad exactly how he has to do it or else he can't help, or the helping person in the family, the doula or whoever. And so you want to be really aware. Are you doing that now? Are you obsessing over the details of how things are done? And gatekeeping in that manner. And then if you've heard of the Edinburgh, this is how we measure postpartum depression. You might get this during your visits to your OBGYN or your midwife. And it's one of the many ways that we can measure postpartum depression, which now we call perinatal depression. What I love about it is that it's really easy, it's simple, it's straightforward, it's 10 questions. What I don't love about it is that it's kind of rigid. It's yes, no answers. And it doesn't really measure anxiety, which we see more often than depression. And I don't like that we say, if you have a score of 10 or below 10, then you're not really depressed, because what we know is that it's hard to measure these things. But you can find the Edinburgh online and you can take it. There's plenty of online versions, and you can take that information to your provider. It is not a diagnostic tool. It is just information. So keep that in mind as you take it. If you are concerned, you can take this during pregnancy. Your partner can take this postpartum. It will apply and work for both of you. So keep that in mind and in your back pocket in case there's concerns. How to get help. I love Postpartum Support International. They're the organization that trained most of us. And you can use their website, postpartum.net, to educate yourself and your support system. If you are experiencing emotional discomfort right now, you might have to do some educating, because the majority of the population does not know that these conditions can impact pregnant individuals. So you will need to maybe educate yourself and draw your support system's awareness to these resources. Find a therapist who specializes in the perinatal season. Psychology Today is a good resource. You can just Google Psychology Today and find that information. But again, I highly recommend PSI's website. They have a directory on there through which you can find all of us who work with the postpartum or the perinatal population. Tell someone how you feel and do not stop talking until you get help. I don't want to discredit the medical community because I so admire their work and they're incredibly smart. I do hear often that a lot of moms will bring their concerns up just to be told, well, you're a new mom, or you're growing a human, of course you feel this way. You're a first-time mom, of course you feel this way. If you don't feel like you and you don't feel okay, you need to tell someone, and you need to keep talking until someone listens. I want to leave you lastly with my contact information. Ashley@perlinprocess.com is how you can reach me if you have any questions at all about the content I've shared here. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook. My handle is @perlinprocess. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope this was helpful for those of you who are expecting, or maybe even some of you are newly postpartum. I appreciate you tuning in, and I look forward to hearing from you if you have any questions.